Hey guys, welcome to the Wild Bits Show. I'm Upamanyu,
And I'm Meghna.
and we have got a great show planned for you. We will, of course, be discussing the headline topic of this week, where 60,000 African penguins have starved to death after their food source numbers have plummeted. And that is a very big, appalling number, and both of us will have a lot to say on the situation. We are also talking about an elephant hunting quota in Botswana. We all know this. There is a game hunting industry that's very much thriving, especially in Africa, where all the big game is. And yeah, we have some thoughts there as well. We have some more things, Meghna.
Yes, we're going to be talking about how an invasion of purple flowers has made Iceland an Instagram paradise and caused a biodiversity crisis. In addition, we also have an update on how the sloth selfies that we've spoken about a few episodes earlier, how the selfie tourism, there are stricter rules adopted now to protect the sloths from pet trade. So we'll give you the update. If we have more time, we're going to talk about other interesting topics, but we also have a special guest today. So be tuned in.
Right. So why don't we go straight into the headline topic and start discussing that because we'll spend some time discussing the headline topic. This is a report from the Guardian, which reports on a study, um, and the headline is 60,000 African penguins starved to death after sardine numbers collapsed. It goes on to say over 60,000 critically endangered African penguins starved to death in two major South African breeding colonies, Dustin and Robben Islands, between 2004 and 2012. Researchers attribute these massive losses, representing over 95% of the population in those areas, to a severe collapse in sardine numbers. Climate crises and relentless overfishing are highlighted as primary drivers of this food scarcity. African penguins, facing an 80% population decline in 30 years, need to accumulate significant fat reserves before their annual 21-day molting period, during which they must remain on land and fast. Insufficient food before or immediately after this crucial period leads to starvation, with most deaths likely occurring at sea. This situation mirrors declines seen elsewhere, underscoring a wider crisis for the species. Um, this is, you know, this is very
Yeah, it's
concerning.
I think it is extremely concerning. Also the fact that the even though this entire study is based between 2004 and 12, it also paints a picture of today's present because this hasn't gone off. All the problems that exist, those problems still exist.
Exactly. And like the numbers are not increasing. That's the highlight of the situation. The numbers are not increased. It's in decline, even if it isn't as bad today. And I'll have a look in the article if it says anything about the current situation. But the numbers will my bet is the numbers are still decline, even if it's not as fast. Now, I am very concerned, more concerned about the reason of that decline. It's not due to encroachment or not primarily due to encroachment or killing or hunting or conflict or anything like that. It is primarily due to um, their food source declining. And why is the food source declining? Of course, I think overfishing and things like that. So I'm more interested in that aspect of things, um, because that seems like an easy problem to solve.
Yeah, I think, and they need this kind of food because they need it to molt, and they need those reserves. So penguins are, animals that store their fat and they use that reserve. So they need to like feed up, and then they need to store that reserve, and then they need it for other things as well. Like so, like in the article, it does say that these African penguins shed and replace their worn-out feathers every year to protect their insulation and waterproofing. However, during the molting period, which takes about 21 days, they have to stay on land. So to survive this fasting period, they need to fatten up beforehand, which means it is a very critical process that goes on every year. And if they do not have access to that kind of food to fatten up, so that they can stay without food for 21 days because they can't go out hunting, then they wouldn't be able to molt, and that means they wouldn't be able to survive. So it all comes down to the food.
Mm. And the article also says the Sardinops sagex, the species name, has had fallen to 25% of its maximum abundance off the coast of Western South Africa since every year since 2004. The study had found the fish are a key food for African penguins. I think it's also about um, you know uh, a species preferring that that particular species as their food. There are numerous species like that around the world, which, if not for their prey species, they would also die off. There are numerous examples like that. And changes in the temperature and salinity of the west coast of Africa have made fishes spawning less successful. Okay, so that is also a reason. So it is more of a indirect impact as well. Fishing, of course, I think fishing is a problem, but it's also an indirect impact is that salinity and temperature changes um, of um, of the sea. And I think again, as Meghna said, our guest today will touch on some of these topics as well. So we'll find out more about this when we speak to our guest. But um, this this temperature changes and salinity has made the sardines not breed as successfully, which is having the downstream impact on their predators. I think we have talked a lot
Yes.
about predators and you know apex predators being very important for an ecosystem, but for them to be efficient and
Surviving.
important, survive, they also need the prey species to reach a certain level at least, Um,
Yeah, and I think like Oops and me have covered this almost every episode, but the thing is climate change is in our face, but we don't want to accept it. And one of the main ways to see this is what this article says, like 25% of these sardine species have declined just because of the climate change. The level of fishing has remained high, and obviously that is contributing to the lack of food resource, and this is one way where we can make a change for the penguins. But also because the temperatures are changing too fast, the salinity of the water is changing too fast, most species are not able to adapt as quickly as you would think they can. And this is causing like disruption across, like every week we we come across these articles saying this species here is confused, this species is having this problem with climate change, or this species has gone extinct. um, and it's really sad, to know that we're living and we're going through this, and we do not know if we would ever have actually like a solution that all the countries would want to work towards, like work towards climate change above development and above economic benefits.
yeah, and um, uh, the temperature change problem is slightly more difficult to solve, in my opinion, Slightly more difficult, as in it would need a lot more coordination and a lot more um, efforts from a lot of different things. But fishing, I think there has been a lot of areas around the globe where declaring a species of sea a sanctuary, especially near the coasts, has seen fish numbers and fish, um, you know, it return, like the fish numbers, the breeding pairs return in large numbers, and that has caused an overspill into the neighboring areas, which in turn has benefited the fishing industry as well. So I think that is a very easy change to be implemented. I don't know how much of South Africa's waters are protected, but certainly I think there is an urgent need now to relook at that percentage and reinvest in protecting more of the coastal waters.
Definitely, because also taking into account in this article, it has said that in 2024, African penguins were classified as critically endangered with fewer than 10,000 breeding pairs left. So they are critically endangered. They don't have food source, which means that they can go extinct really fast if changes are not made quickly. And as Oops mentioned, something like fishing is something like fishing can be done overnight. You know, you can make that change. You can say that, okay, we cannot have these fish that are caught, and then the fisheries can go for other fish or find a different way to do this, but at least not harm the sardines for at least a couple of years till the sardines improve, the penguins improve, and then maybe you can start fishing a small amount of it. But the penguins need to be put on priority at the moment, at least.
Yes, penguins are as is any other species. Penguins are uh, fascinating species, especially uh, African penguins are a fascinating species in them as well, in themselves as well. And I think also more research needs to happen in their behaviors and how they are being affected by this particular issue, to make sure that there is enough science backing up all the decisions that the government is taking. So if the government decides to take a decision otherwise, then it's clearly making that choice to go against whatever the science is suggesting or the science is advising for the government to do. Um,
Yes,
I think,
and African penguins are only found in Africa, especially in South Africa. When you go, there are certain pockets where these African penguins are found. They have faced a lot of other adverse crises as well, which has caused the plummeting of their population. Um, and this is really sad to hear that this might deteriorate their population even further. Something as simple as fishing, this can be implemented, and we can make sure that these penguins that are found only in that area of the world, that they're protected and they have that kind of what would you say, access to the food source that they love the most, because the sardines are more important to them than they are to us. We can live without the sardines, we can eat something else, but they can't eat anything else.
yeah, I was also trying to find how much of um South Africa's waters is protected, but I think I'm not able to find the exact number here. But definitely, I can find some statements online where it says it vows to protect more by a certain year, which I think is 2030 or something like that. So definitely, I think giving those protections, and we have seen those protections work very well in other parts of the world, as I said. There can be no doubts about it. There can be no skepticism about it that this protection would not work, or it would hamper the livelihood of fishermen or whatever, that argument would not be applicable here, because overwhelming evidence that it is working. It is actually beneficial for the fishermen to protect more marine areas, and this will also ensure that the penguins, which is like a keystone species of that ecosystem and an endemic species, as Meghna was saying as well, um, gets the food. I mean, that's like the basic thing, that every animal, including us, in this planet needs. So I think denying that, you know, through actions, maybe every one of us is not directly, involved, but indirectly, every one of us is involved in this situation. So yeah, I hope those solutions can be found, and uh, those protections can be imposed for the penguins.
Yes. And I think we use this hope word also a lot on our episode because sadly, obviously, we don't have the reins in our hands to make these policy changes. So we can only request and we can only hope. And in this case, South Africa really needs to step up because it's their penguins that we're talking about. Tourists come especially to see these penguins. And it's endemic and it's unique. So, they need to protect the penguins, and protecting the penguins, at least in this case, requires effort, but not effort to the extent of climate change initiatives, but effort to the extent of just changing what is allowed in fishing, at least for a few years or maybe a decade or two, till population stabilize. And we both think that is a very uh, I wouldn't say nominal, but a very fair thing to ask the government to make this change or hope that the government makes such a change.
And I was also thinking, because we also touch a bit on how individuals, and also sort of think about, or think out loud about how individuals can make certain changes, or even if it's possible for individuals to make certain changes. In this case, I don't know how much of this fish that is caught in South African waters is exported and how much is consumed locally. But depending on that number, I would assume that there must be a guide in South Africa, like many other countries which consume a lot of seafood and river fish, particular seasons to eat certain fishes. That a similar guide, I hope, exists within South Africa as well. So, as an individual, I think if such a guides, and if anyone's worth watching from South Africa, please do let us know. If such a guide exists, if such a you know website or a page on social media of that kind exists, as an individual, we can always go there and see if this particular species of sardine is okay to be consumed all throughout the year. I certainly guess it is not, but which parts of the year it is okay to be consumed in, and so on and so forth. I feel. Um,
Yeah, that is one way to go about it. But also, apart from that, I think there has to be like a blanket ban, at least for a while, if there have if the reserves need to be reserved for the penguins. So that is
yeah,
one thing that I think can be done, and that's the only solution that we can see for this problem.
true, true. That is it. It is sad. The number is very, 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 very appalling. It's when we read about this first, it was very striking as well. 8 years, 60,000 penguins. That's almost 7,500 penguins per year. That is getting killed. Of course, it didn't happen like year by year basis, but it was a whole number. But that is a very high number, and you know, it again. I don't know how much media coverage African penguins get, but certainly this is an important one of those coverages. So it brings about the attention to more and more people, and of course, then they can ask their representatives in the country to speak about, or enforce such policies, um, so that the future can be saved.
Yep.
Yeah,
I guess we'll
cool.
keep you updated about what the government does and if
Yeah.
the penguins will get their hands on their sardines.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a great time to switch to the next topic.
True. Yeah.
So our next topic from penguins will be all the way to lupins. Um, and the title is called How an Invasion of Purple Flowers Made Iceland an Instagram Paradise and Caused a Biodiversity Crisis. This is an article from The Guardian. Nootka lupins, introduced to Iceland in the 1940s to repair damaged volcanic soil, have become an accidental national symbol and a huge tourist draw. Vast purple fields create an Instagram paradise in summer, with visitors flocking to pose amidst the blooms, enhancing Iceland's picturesque image. Photographers note requests for proposals among the flowers, highlighting their appeal. However, this aesthetic appeal masks a significant ecological crisis. The non native lupins are aggressively spreading across the island, covering fjords, mountains, and lava fields, threatening native species. Scientists and many Icelanders are increasingly concerned as this rampant invasion causes a severe biodiversity crisis, overshadowing their initial purpose and charm. So, for people who are not aware of what the lupins look, let me just share my screen real quick. 1 minute. Um, oh, 1 second. I think it's not
I think the
shared.
wrong one has been shared. Yeah.
That is 1 second. I think my system's. I had the
I can I can
shared.
try sharing it.
No, no. I had it shared. I don't know why I did not pick it up. But okay, wait. Let me just share it back. 1 second. Just give me 1 second. And okay, let's share. Oh, you shared it? I've shared it. Okay,
Yeah.
I've shared it now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so these are the lupins. Anyone who's seen these lupins, it's not just in Iceland, but even in New Zealand, these lupins are an invasive species. They're really pretty, they smell really good, especially the yellow ones. But they also grow really fast. And they bloom only for a couple of months in a year, which is usually summer. And they look really pretty. So everybody wants a photo of, in the lupins with the beautiful Iceland or New Zealand backdrops. Um, and even in New Zealand, when we were there, they would tell us that how these flowers have become a problem only because of how aggressive their growth is. Um, but in this case, basically, something again, it's the same thing. Like we introduce something and then it becomes unmanageable, so then we try to manage it somehow. And it's the same story for even animals that have been introduced elsewhere. And it's the same problem that we're having with the lupins here. So we have a discussion question which says, can a beautiful invasive species be a national symbol if it causes ecological harm? What do you think about it, Oops?
I think this this species, from what I remember, this species is originally from, like, spans across the Americas and some pockets in Africa. That's the origin of the species. I don't know why this species is so grows so rapidly in colder environments. Iceland definitely a cold environment, and secondly, I think New Zealand, especially the places where it grows in, is a very cold environment as well. So I don't know why this grows in cold environments so rapidly, but certainly it is taking over the native landscape a lot. And I think it, I don't know, flowers like this, exotic flowers and beautiful looking, beautiful smelling flowers, is why I think greenhouses were and botanical gardens were created first, to have exotic species in a country. So I don't think it can, it can be a national symbol if it causes ecological harm. Um, Certainly, due to social media, it's very easy to be associated like that. It's very easy for a country to be known for that, or a place to be known for that, because it grows there. But certainly, it just fuels it back into the idea of, um, the locals having uh, income from tourists visiting because of the lupins. And then, if the government wants to eradicate that particular patch of lupins, then obviously the government will face pushback, because um, the locals are dependent on it for tourism. So it's a vicious cycle that has entered. But in my view, I think controlled growing of these flowers, how you have tulip gardens and things like that, as long as it is grown in a controlled area and it's, you know, farmed in that area, that's fine. But otherwise, I think it is a serious problem.
So I'm just going to share my screen again real quick. Before we look at the picture, it says that those who love the lupin argue that it has successfully helped regenerate plant cover over time, just as Jarnison or Bjarnason intended when he brought it back from Alaska. Up to 40% of Iceland was covered in forest when the Vikings arrived in the 9th century, but more than a millennium of deforestation and sheep farming has resulted in significant desertification. And because of this desertification, when they brought the lupins back, it was to bring back some kind of vegetation because of, so we created a problem, then we made a band-aid solution, and that band-aid solution is again creating a problem. Now coming to this picture, it basically says that soil in lupin covered patches of land is looser than soil in native vegetation places. So as you can see, the leftmost one is very broken, while the rightmost one is quite solid. So the
Mm.
lupins are affecting the native vegetation this way by making the soil loose, and I think it affects the native vegetation in a way that native vegetation cannot grow with the same um, speed or same what would you say, like the same way it would growing without the lupins. But also the article goes on to say that revegetating land with lupins is like fixing a toothache with a rock, just a hand what would you say, a band-aid situation. It will work, but you'll most likely damage a whole lot of other things that weren't damaged to begin with. Now one of the things, oops, I feel is like when do we get the punishment for such kind of things, like when do we get the punishment for, like, oh, we have deforested it, we have created all these sheep farming landscapes, the same thing we spoke about New Zealand last time. We bring in these band-aid solutions and then we say that it's a problem, so we need to cut these lupins down or make sure that they grow up in controlled environments. But when do we become the blame bearer? And
I
you know
think the problem with that approach, certainly some people do take the blame. The problem with the approach is that it will severely affect the human mental health, and that will become another problem where humans become mentally unstable. That is certainly something we don't want. The society will stop functioning as it is. So that's the whole problem of us taking the blame. It will eat away at us, in a way that we will stop functioning as a society if we do decide to take that blame. I mean, a lot of people won't. A lot of people won't. But for those who will take it to heart, it will become a severe problem for them. That is what I think. um,
I
and
think
then
you're
nothing can,
only
even conservation cannot function that way. S-
you're only focusing on the negative, because I feel like the day you start taking the blame, you might actually start accepting where we're wrong, and we might start doing something good. So something like climate change, until and unless it's not kind of ingrained into us that this is the blame that we need to take upon ourselves and this is the change we need to do, I don't think the change will come. And it's not just for that, for everything that has changed, it has come from acceptance. So even let's say when slavery was okay, it was only when we started accepting slavery is not okay is when we made changes. Or even for women's rights, when we said that okay, women just don't belong in the kitchen, but they should have equal rights to work, equal rights to go outside and have their own freedom, that is when things started changing. So that acceptance needs to come in for any kind of change. And with climate, I feel like we don't want to accept because the climate doesn't fight back. Like slaves are people who used to talk, women are people who used to talk, so they started fighting for themselves. But for the climate and for the animals and for the environment, sadly it's again us humans who have to talk. So until and unless we don't take the blame, how will we be the makers of change?
I think blaming in, I don't know. We do take the blame in these cases that we are the ones who have done it, but I don't know how you are imagining, like, how, what would that situation be? Because in my mind, I can't imagine a situation where, or uh, like, I can't imagine anything extra coming from us accepting, like, because we do accept that, like, this is a human caused problems. But other than that, saying that this is a human caused problem, this is a problem caused by us, other than accepting that, I don't know what more can be done in that regard. Like, we can donate, we can say, work for conservation efforts, but I don't know. I don't know. Other than that, what could be done if the general public can be motivated in that way to work in conservation issues?
It has to be again something that we spoke about last time. In fact, Iceland is one of those countries which has those, what would you say, internal uh, plants producing glass houses kind of things. So they have
Yeah,
these stacked glass houses, and they grow a lot of produce there, like a lot of vegetables that cannot be grown elsewhere. So they have, they have that technology. And if I don't know how big sheep farming is in Iceland and how much deforestation has been caused, but afforestation can be one way to go for it. Like try to get in more native trees when you're weeding out the lupins. And secondly, also like try to bring in more cover. I know that Iceland already has a huge amount of green cover. It's one of the places where they do not really focus on just development. It's the same with New Zealand. But despite that, I just feel like these two countries feel like, with the lupins especially, it's something that we brought onto ourselves. So instead of making any sacrifices on our end, we just want to make sacrifices on the lupins end. And the lupins are just, thriving and surviving because that's what they do. In cold places, they survive, and then in the summers they bloom, and they bring in like huge amounts of tourists, be it Iceland or New Zealand. You will see these pictures, there'll be like updates, there'll be posts saying that this is where you'll be able to see the lupins, this is where you'll be able to take photos with the lupins. And Oops and me have gone, and we've taken photos with those lupins because they're extremely pretty, and we know that they only exist for a little time. So and I don't think we have like a guilt factor with that comes with it. We know it's not great, but we appreciated the lupins as well. So it's a very thin line to draw where um you know uh, people appreciate it, people come to your country for the lupins. So until and unless there's some other way for those lupins to coexist with the native vegetation, I don't see a long-term solution until there are better areas of afforestation, and maybe some areas of some remote areas where weeding can be done.
I think the problem here, and this is the problem with any introduced species. And sorry, before I go ahead, I'll just correct myself. This article does mention this particular species of lupin, the Nootka lupin, is native to Alaska. So definitely a very cold place it is coming from. So might be even blooming in the winters as well. Oh no, it is blooming in summer, but yeah, native to Alaska. So I think the soil example and the soil, the highlight that you did on the soil of around the lupins, I think there's no way that the lupins could survive, like could coexist there, because it is making the soil extremely brittle and extremely uh, loose. So the only way is to eradicate that species, um, to be able to. And this is similar to all the different introduced species, be it animal species, be it a plant species. It is changing. It might be subtle, but it is changing the environment in such a way that the only option is to eradicate. Otherwise, the environment cannot survive. And soil, if soil is loose, that means there will be more erosion, there'll be more dust, there'll be hundreds of different things that comes with it. Um, so, also I think the argument that the green cover is being increased by lupins. I mean, I don't know. Is it making that much of a difference in the greenery maybe, but in the carbon capture and things like that, I don't think it's making a huge difference there. Um,
We don't know about the carbon capture, but the lupins were literally introduced because they needed afforestation, and this was a quicker way of afforestation for them. And the lupins were brought in from Iceland. Now, the lupins are not at fault because the lupins are just growing and thriving. Now, if you bring in the lupins and you're bringing in to solve a problem, suddenly your problem has been solved, and your problem is more than solved, that it's become a problem itself. You again start targeting the lupins. Why don't you start targeting the sheep farmers or the areas where the deforestation has happened? Start targeting those areas again and start weeding out and putting in native plants or something like that. But make it something where the lupins are not the only thing to blame. The humans that brought the lupins, and what they can do now to change that, that has to be a whole package. It just can't be the lupins, it just can't be a blame game. It's always a blame game where everything is thrown onto something else, but never the humans. And
because it's easy in the legal
definitely
frameworks, it's easy to weed out these lupins and afforest. It's a low hanging fruit.
true, but also look at it this way. The lupins are a major cause of tourist pull in all these cold countries where the lupins are considered an invasive species, be it New Zealand, be it Iceland. So they cannot be completely um, eliminated, and they cannot be completely in a tulip kind of field either, because people are not going to come and watch the lupins, just see the lupins. They want the lupins in like a raw, rugged environment with that backdrop to take those photos or have those
You can
proposals.
have a farm there. You can have a farm in a raw, rugged environment. Um, just have those backgrounds. I'm more than sure that it is possible.
Sure. I mean,
To have it.
that might be one way to go, for it, to maybe make it like a paid experience and then have the other places weeded out. That could be a thing. But also, I think there has to be more afforestation of native species while weeding this species out if they don't want the lupins. And at the same time, there needs to be like maybe a change, a push everywhere across the world, like wherever this deforestation has come from a lot of grazing and sheep and cows and all these farms. There needs to be a change, at least a gradual change, so there is a change in the diet of people, there's a change in land use, and that is the only way the native wildlife will thrive. We need to give them their space back. We've taken too much space from them.
That is, I fully agree with that statement. I fully agree with that statement. It is something that definitely needs to happen. Um, you know, the afforestation definitely needs to happen, and if this lupin population can be moved into a farm, then with the views to attract the tourists and things like that, then I think those areas can be afforested pretty quickly. Um, uh, I, yeah, when I read about Iceland bringing back lupin from Alaska um, to regenerate plant cover, that feels like a very um, very bare minimum thing. Like put something green. That is in no way plant cover in my opinion. Like why would you put plant cover just to paint something, paint an area green just to make sure the area is green? Maybe soil erosion, dust, those might be the reasons which lupin might help with. But in terms of capturing carbon and things like that, yeah, I don't think the lupin will do much. If the only reason is to make sure the dust from the soil doesn't go into the urban areas and the residential areas, I think lupin is, yeah, kind of will help with that. But soil erosion, water retention, those things, because the soil is so loose there, and the picture that Meghna showed clearly illustrates that as well. Um, yeah, the those things lupins are not helping with. So I think it's time to wipe them out, put them in a farm, and reforest those areas with native species.
I wish it was that easy when maybe changes came to also wrapping the knuckles of humans and be like, okay, from today onwards these are things you can't do or these are things you can do, like in populated countries like ours, be like, okay, these are the restrictions you have or these are the restrictions you have in different countries. It's high time that we have those restrictions and not just the lupins or the animals. um
Yeah,
and we have to
I
know.
agree. It would be great, but I also know that it is next to impossible.
But also, I mean, the lupins might have been a band-aid solution, but back then in the 1940s, whenever it was introduced, it must have been one of the best solutions because they must have seen how it worked in other places, how the lupins covered vast areas and grew really fast. So it must have been one of those things where volcanic soil was brought together with lupins, and the deforestation and the effects that it had, they could see that those effects were nullified or at least reduced by the lupins. So the lupins did their bit, but now the lupins have again become Iceland's and New Zealand's enemy. Let's see what they are going to do about it and what their long-term solution for this is. Um, I mean, those lupins are something, and they're really pretty, but we'll have to see what the governments are going to do, what they're going to say. So we're going to keep you updated. Um, yeah, oops.
Yeah, yeah, we will follow these stories as well. And again, hoping something comes out in the next um you know whatever duration the time. Again, governments tend to move slow, in especially in these types of cases. So yeah, we'll keep you in the loop about the lupins. Speaking of that, I think we can move to the next topic. Um, so this is from Mongabe's reporting desk, where the article is, the reporter's headlined, Botswana's elephant hunting quota threatens to wipe out mature bulls. The article consists of this report, which says Botswana's reintroduction of elephant trophy hunting in 2019 after a 5-year ban is significantly reducing the population of large, older bulls, a vital component of elephant society. Researchers' simulations indicate that current quota of around 400 elephants, while small percentage of the total population, disproportionately targets mature bulls over 30 and 50 years old. These older bulls are crucial for breeding, social learning, and transmitting general knowledge essential for herd survival. The study by Elephants Without Borders highlights that current hunting quotas do not account for other mortality factors like poaching, drought, disease, and human elephant conflict. Even professional hunters acknowledge the quota may be too high, suggesting a reduction and the allocation of some bulls for population management. This is an interesting story where the government is oblivious, but or whoever is um, issuing those permits is oblivious, but even the hunters who are taking those permits are, um, you know, reporting that this is too high a number. So since 2019, Botswana has permitted roughly 400 elephants to be hunted, which is about 0.3% of the country's population. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
trophy hunting is one of
I
those
think the discussion
things.
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I think the discussion question is this: that is there a place for trophy hunting in 2025? And I think Oops just wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I I think trophy hunting no. Hunting yes, trophy hunting no. If you're hunting for food, if you're hunting for um food, that is the only reason, or skin or things like that. Um, that's okay.
No,
Hunting,
not
yes.
even skin. I mean, if you're saying skin, then it means that you're okay with those alligator skin bags or whatever, those bags that these companies come up with. Hunting, even for food, has to be for sustenance. It can't be something where it's for pleasure. If there is a way for you to
How
get
is it
that
hunting for
sustenance
pleasure
for.
if you're eating that?
Oh, there are people who hunt for pleasure and then take it back. Right? I mean, you've seen those plenty of those in New Zealand where they hunt those wild goats and those deers, and then they
No,
actually
but
take
that is where
back
I'm
that.
drawing the line. If they're taking back and not eating it, that is trophy hunting.
Yeah, but if they're hunting it also for just pure pleasure, not for sustenance, also, I'm not okay with that kind of hunting in the
What do
sense
you
that if
how do you define that?
okay, so one is that you live in a remote place, like how the Inuits in Alaska are. So they do hunt the seals and they do eat the
Hmm.
seals because that is what their sustenance is for. They need it to survive. Like there is no other way they can survive. But the hunters that hunt the deer or the wild boar or other kind of things in places that you get food or you have access to other kind of food or it's not required, those are pleasure hunting where you might eat it, you might not cut a trophy out of it, but still it's not required. Like, that kind of hunting is also not
No,
something that
but
is
wouldn't
adding.
you wouldn't you say that hunting is much better than buying supermarket food? I would say that.
Hunting then supermarket food is again only great if it is providing sustenance to you in some way. If it is not, you see, at the end of the day, if it is a pleasurable activity, then you're not doing anything for the
Why
environment, and
can't
you're not
it
doing
not
something.
it be pleasure and doing something for the environment?
Because the moment it's pleasure, then it's not something that you're doing for the environment, it's something you're doing for yourself.
But I'm
The
not throwing it
environment
away.
part of it.
I'm not throwing it away. I'm not wasting it. I'm just eating it. And if I'm eating that, that means I'm not eating something else because I can't be eating everything at some time. I
I
have to
I
be not
don't
eating
think
something
that's
else.
I, I don't think that's how it works. A lot of people actually hunt just to put photos of them. A lot of people, like, the
Yeah,
eating is
that's
actually
trophy
not their
hunting.
primary purpose.
That is trophy
No, no,
hunting.
no,
But
no.
if at
Not
the end of
not
the day,
not
no,
photos.
I'm saying if at the
No, no,
end
even
of the
with
day
these
I'm
deers.
eating,
No, even with these deers and everything that you're saying, a lot of people with
hmm,
their profile pictures and everywhere in places, they would have these photos. It doesn't have to be like the trophy for hunting literally has the head cut off and put on a trophy. It doesn't have to be trophy hunting. The thing with pleasurable hunting is that you go out and your main motive is pleasure. It is not eating.
hmm,
So when
hmm.
eating is the first thing, then it's fine to have that kind of hunting. The thing that you're talking about is wastage. Wastage is separate. The whole concept of hunting and why it's needed or why we were hunter gatherers was for sustenance. It was not for pleasure,
No,
it was
no,
not for game, it was not for
I'm
choice.
saying if it is for pleasure, I'm saying ends justifying the means. If it is even if it's for pleasure, but at the end of the day, I'm eating it, and by eating it, I'm not eating supermarket food or farm bought food or farm grown food, then I don't see a problem in it. That's where I draw the line. That's what I'm saying.
No, I draw the line much before that because you're doing nothing good for the animal. You might think you're doing, but you're doing good for yourself, and then the animal is just like a side thing, because these kind
But
of
that is a
places where
great
you have
thing.
other options.
That is a
No,
great
so
thing. If you're
uh,
fulfilling your
no, it's
human
not.
need along with a byproduct being helping the environment, oftentimes it's the other way around, where the byproduct is your pleasure and then you're harming the environment. But if it's the
No, so
other way around,
there are
where
two
the
things
byproduct
here.
is helping the environment, that is great for me.
No, so
Why
there are
why
two
is it
things
not
here.
great?
It's not great because, one, obviously a lot of these places where this pleasurable hunting happens, there's no proper regulation, there's no proper numbers, there's no checking. So a lot of pleasurable hunters go over and above the limits, because at least in certain places where trophy hunting happens, there are quotas, there are licenses, there are numbers, there's some kind of accountability. With pleasure hunting, there is no kind of accountability, so you would never know how much of it is being hunted down. At least with like store bought meat and
No,
everything, you can
I
trace it.
don't think anywhere where hunting is allowed, because you need to get licenses, you need to get permits everywhere hunting is allowed. So I don't
You
think
get
anywhere
you
hunting is allowed there is not a quota.
No, so no. So hunting with licenses is the license for your gun, but in a lot of places where, let's say, the deers are in abundance, or the warthogs, or the
Yeah, if it's an invasive species, then yeah.
if it is a
But
hog,
I'm very sure there is a quota for that as well.
there's no checking on those kind of things, because trophy huntings and all, there's actually like a lot of money that you get per license, so there's like a
Mm.
strict number of licenses, and there's some kind of checking. With other things, you don't have that kind of checking. And I mean, in 2025, again, if we're asking for the people to be responsible and for the people to sacrifice things, then I think this is one of the things that you do sacrifice, like things that are giving you pleasure but are not really helping the environment at the end of the day. Then
But it is helping the environment.
it's not really helping the environment. The whole point is that you switch from meat to non-meat, right? And if you are looking for meat, then you look for it as a sustenance perspective, not as a pleasure perspective. The moment you're looking at pleasure perspective, you're not really doing anything to sacrifice that little change of yours. That little change of yours
No,
has to
but
come from inside.
why is sacrifice important in that equation?
Because at the end of the day, we as humans would be okay with giving up animals, with giving up the environment, with giving up the plants, but we're not okay with giving up anything ourselves. Sacrifice is important from our side, because if that change
No,
is
but
not
why
coming
is it
from us,
important if it's causing, like, if the end is good, then why the sacrifice is important? That's what I'm saying. Like, this is a great way to have people engage. It's a win-win situation. That is what I'm saying.
it's not
Why
a
is it
win-win
not a
situation.
win-win situation?
See, one obviously it brings in two three things. There is this whole aspect of compassion, there's this whole aspect of how you view and treat animals
No, no,
when you're
leave all that. Just
no, it
say
is part of it.
statistics.
No, it is.
Statistically, it's a win-win situation, right?
No, there are a lot of obviously things with it. Now, if you're brought up thinking that hunting is great, then you might actually become addicted to it. You might become one of those people who hunt animals
Yeah.
first, then go to murder people. You can also be this person who has zero compassion for animals because you look at them as commodities from the time you were brought up. But in sustenance places, they actually have respect for that. So with the Inuits in Alaska, they don't waste a single part of that seal, and the seals are something that they respect. Like, even though they have seals and they're killing them, but they have enough respect for those seals as well, and that respect doesn't come in. So this pleasure thing is just something where it's like a band-aid solution. Again, you think it is great for the environment, but it is just a facade, because you're looking at yourself first than the animals. You don't look at the long-term consequences of how hunting is inculcated into children. Like the same thing how I was talking about possums. Like, now little children are inculcated that, oh, you should kill them, you should take part in these hunts, you should do these kind of things. So you're kind of growing children with that kind of emotion, that negative emotion when it comes to animals. Sustenance is very different from pleasure. And that kind of change needs to come from within us. If those people who are actually hunting those deer are not doing it for photos, for social media, for teaching their children these kind of things, that oh, it's great, it's a ego thing, it's a male boost kind of thing. If it's not for that, but it is just to teach your child, if sustenance is needed someday, that's still fine. But the cause is very important for the end goal.
I think statistically speaking, in that space, it is helping the environment. Like, statistically speaking, it is definitely helping the environment if you're not consuming the supermarket food. Like, if you're consuming a hunted food instead, all of those you spoke about is purely on human psychology and how human psychology works, and that is on the individual who is doing that hunting. But in that process, you are not buying supermarket meat if you're eating that food. That's what I'm saying. If it's for food,
You're
then it's fine.
simplifying the entire process. That is where my problem is. I think because you are pro
Because
hunting,
the
so you
ends
don't want to
justify the means.
you're pro hunting, you don't want to see the bigger picture of it, because anything is not to be seen in
No, no,
one.
I'm not pro hunting. I'm pro hunting for food.
Yes, I'm also pro hunting for food, for sustenance, not for Instagram, not for teaching your children, not for inculcating these kind of values that animals are commodities, that hunting is a way for
What if
ego.
what about certain animals and commodities?
All
We
animals that you're shooting.
already teach that when we are buying supermarket chicken, beef, pork, or whatever,
Yes,
venison.
but also at the same time, you're also teaching your children when you do these kind of things. Like, a lot of people, when it comes to hunting, it's more a power game. It's not sustenance. It's a power game of
That's true.
how. Yes,
That's true.
and that power game is a problematic problem of the hunting. The whole hunting community sees it as like a power thing. It's not just a sustenance thing. Even with something like fishing, even those fishing where it says that you'll catch and release, it causes problems to the fish. So it is our entertainment and their cost. So you have to see what is the cause as
So
well.
you're saying
Like,
the Inuits don't feel that pleasure when they hunt? They might
no,
be
they
hiding it. They might be not speaking about it, but they
but
don't feel that dopamine rush. They don't feel that adrenaline rush.
the whole point of the Inuits is they don't do it for that they might be feeling it as a secondary thing. If you're feeling it as a secondary thing because of your primary
Uh,
hunger, that is
that's
very different.
that's that's
Obviously
I
your prime
think.
I'm sorry, but your primary hunger is more important than your secondary pleasure. Your secondary pleasure shouldn't be your primary pleasure. When it comes to environment, your primary support should be that, okay, how can I do something for the environment? It shouldn't be how can I make myself happy. When that question is nullified and you can put yourself above for
Look,
how.
if that question is not answered, how can I make myself happy? I think then more than the situation you mentioned, how can I make myself happy if that question is not answered in the situation and the society that we live in? That's when people will go and commit crimes and commit unspeakable harm to other humans.
But the whole point of your happiness shouldn't come at the cost of some animal or some living thing, right? Your happiness should come from something that
Yeah,
you have
obviously
done.
within legal boundaries, but I think the hunting for food within legal boundaries is fine, but you're obviously not eating an elephant or a giraffe or a lion or anything else for that matter as a big game. If it were an antelope or something like that that you would end up eating, again, borderline, but if it's not a threatened species, then I'd be fine with it. If the study showed that this is the number, the wildebeest are reproducing 5,000 every year, and we are issuing licenses for 500 or 100 uh, wildebeest every year. That's fine. That's fine. If you're eating it at the end of the day, if you're not trophy hunting, if you're not just hunting for Instagram, you can be hunting for Instagram and for food, but food has to be part of that equation.
For me, it has to be, if you're really doing it, it should be food as the equation. Secondly, food habits need to change. Thirdly, trophy hunting definitely needs to be banned across
That we agree
everywhere.
on.
Yes, the whole concept of trophy hunting is something that I've never understood. So you go, you have a gun, you have this big animal in front of you, be it a lion, be it a tiger, be it what would you say, an elephant, and you shoot it down because you have a gun in whatever range, and then you cut the head and you put it on a plaque, and you put it in your living room or wherever you do, and you're proud of it. Like, how are you
No,
even
but
proud
trophy
of it?
hunting existed before the gun as well.
On a plaque.
Like, I don't know what, but people used to hunt for bigger animals before the gun existed.
Yes, but then it might also be defense. Was it as an ego boost,
No,
or
kings.
was
I
it
mean, kings.
or the other? The kings also, it was the same thing. It was to show
No,
strength. It
but
was
it
to
was
show.
not gun.
Yeah, but it was no. But then that time, I think you still showed some kind of, what would you say? um, strength. It was some kind of power show. It was still not a great thing, but at least you did something where you were in front of the animal and you took the animal down with your hands, even if you used a tool. With the gun, it's literally like, you're on a vehicle, you are in the range, the animal can do nothing to protect itself, and you're just shooting a helpless animal just so you can get its head in your living room, which makes zero sense to me. It makes zero sense.
Yeah, that is true. And trophy hunting is something that yeah, it is something that I I wouldn't say I understand it, but I understand the thrill that the people might be seeking from a hunted trophy, but certainly it has no place in 2025. I think there is a clear line for me. What is considered you know permitted hunting, and I think we spoke about the bears in Florida before. We spoke about, I think, other licenses being issued for other big game as well around the world. And this is Africa again. These are threatened species. These are species that require um, the certain the mature bulls are being targeted. That's required for the societal structure of elephants. And uh, in 2025 there is no use, and I think we have spoken about um, simulators, virtual reality sets and things like that as well. So those things can be used heavily by people who are seeking that thrill of hunting like a bigger animal than themselves, a deer, sorry, an elephant, lion, tiger, whatever they want. I think those urges can be satisfied in that way, but certainly not by hunting the actual things. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and if your government allows for, you know game hunting for food, and things like that within legal limits. Yeah, then
Yeah.
that
and
that too.
and the weird part is, in this article, like, I mean, the professional hunters also say that the quota may be too
That
high,
is
because
exactly.
because the quota is not affecting for other mortality factors like poaching and disease and human and elephant conflict. So it's quite funny that that the hunters still acknowledge, but the government doesn't, and hopefully the government will acknowledge. And I mean, I honestly hope what Oops has said, like, we are steps and realistic ways of feeling that experience would probably do much better for the environment, for the animals, and for the people who want those kind of experiences. It's probably much better than actually going and hunting down a real elephant. It might not be the same, but we are in 2025 and we need to make those changes.
That is so true. Um, do you want to give the quick update, Meghna, before we move on to the next segment?
Sure. So my update is going to be really, really quick. It's about these sloth selfies that we were talking about. How the selfies with sloths has been causing this rampant tourism and pet trade. So, CITES, the Global Wildlife Trade Regulator, has approved stricter international trade rules for Linz and Hoffman's two-toed sloths, effective within 90 days. These species are increasingly exploited by the tourism industry for selfies and for illegal pet trade, driven by their peaceful, smiling appearance. The new site's Appendix 2 listing, proposed by Brazil, Costa Rica, and Panama, mandates that exporting countries provide scientific proof that any transaction will not harm the sloth's conservation status. This critical measure aims to combat rising illegal trafficking, which sees sloths torn from their Amazonian and Central American habitats to be used as tourist attractions or sold as exotic pets. The regulations apply to all 185 sites parties, offering enhanced protection to prevent population decline and ensure their survival against cruel exploitation, thereby safeguarding these vulnerable creatures. Hoping this puts an end, or at least makes a change to the sloth selfie tourism. The sloths may be smiling from outside, but they're crying from inside when you um, kind of help with these kind of photo exhibits. So please don't go for those kind of selfie tourism. And this is one
I
of
think
the
it's similar
positive.
to the Iceland being the place for you know Instagram worthy photos, or New Zealand being that place with the lupins and things like that as well, right? It's social media is causing that FOMO effect, and that's harming nature and these spaces in a way that wasn't really possible before. Maybe one ad in a newspaper or one photograph in a newspaper someplace, and people have the capacity now to, the financial capacity and the, other kinds of freedom the society has allowed us to travel and do those trips more often. So I think the combination of rapidly spreading information and um, having those moments captured in that way, and having the capacity to travel and go to those places has really um, compounded this problem.
Yes. So let's hope that this is, going to make a big change for the slots. This is one of the positive updates we have for today, and yeah, that's my update on this topic. Let's bring in our guest speaker.
Yeah, I'll just introduce her before bringing her on the stage. So, very exciting today. So, today we are joined by Jessica Hankins, a PhD student in geological sciences at the University of Colorado Boulder. Jess is a doctoral student and the faculty manager of the Raman Microspectroscopy Lab at the University of Colorado Boulder. For the last decade, she has investigated the implications of ocean acidification on coral skeleton chemistry. That's what we'll be talking about. Such an important and interesting research topic. Her current research focuses on refining a Raman-based proxy for argonite saturation state. Again, we'll understand what that is. A lot of technical terms. An ocean carbonate chemistry parameter that is both directly affected by ocean acidification and governs the favorability for formation of coral skeletons. To assess how coral skeletons have responded to changes in ocean chemistry in the past and better understand how corals will respond in the future. Outside of research, Jess is an avid audiophile who loves to play guitar, sing, and attend live music events. She also spends as much time outdoors as possible, whether hiking, scuba diving, surfing, or snowboarding, and enjoys cuddling up with her two fluffy cats, Nimbus and Nova. Hello, Jessica. Welcome to the Wildwood Show. Thank you for taking the time to join us. We are very aware that it is well past midnight in your part of the world, and we really appreciate you being here despite of that time constraint. It means a lot to us and our listeners, and we are thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, of course. I would love, anytime. I'll always love to talk science. So at
Thank you.
least it's a
Thank you.
weekend.
Thank you so much. So I guess we always like to begin with, you know, hearing about the journey of a researcher that has led them to the current research interests and things like that. So share with us, what has that journey been for you?
Wow, that's a very complicated question because I am definitely one of those people who does not have a linear career pathway. But I will
That's what
say,
makes it interesting.
yeah, and I think it's great because I will say, like, I think a lot of people in science think that you have to have a linear career pathway, and I don't think that that needs to be the way. So let me just, be that person.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always wanted to be a climate scientist, I guess. My dad is really interested in green energy, carbon emissions, like how humans are impacting our natural environment. He's not a scientist though, but growing up, he would just always involve me in watching climate documentaries. And I was a very weird child who, instead of watching cartoons, watched the Weather Channel. So, yeah, more or less, I just always really wanted to know how humans were impacting our environment. And then I didn't really have the opportunity to go to college like normal people do, into a 4-year university. So I went to community college actually for a couple years and got my associate's degree in math because I love math. And I actually thought I wanted to be more of an atmospheric physics or atmospheric chemistry person. And then I ended up at actually where I am now, but I ended up there for undergrad and then I left for a while, more or less studying I wanted to do atmospheric chemistry, but I got my degree in atmospheric and oceanic science.
Mm.
A class that basically my professor was like, you should focus on this topic, ocean acidification. And at that time, I had heard of it, but I didn't really know about it. And I was a junior in college, and more or less I did a research project on OA. That's what I'll call it, ocean acidification. And I thought it was super fascinating. At the time, it was, 2015. Yeah, so 10 years ago. I thought it was super fascinating. It was, it was research, but it was still, there was just so many unknowns. And just as a budding scientist, I was like, this is super fascinating. What is happening? How are we causing this to happen? And also, what are the implications of this on our environment? And so, being in a landlocked state, didn't really have many opportunities to look into it, but I was always really interested in corals growing up on the ocean. So I kind of, after I graduated, took some time, did research in Thailand, Florida, went back to New Jersey, which is where I was from, doing tons of research in ocean acidification, looking into coral skeletons, and then leading to my master's degree in Hawaii, where the paper that we're going to talk about really came from, where I really finally got to look into it and actually focus on how not only is ocean acidification affecting coral skeletons visually or I want to say biologically, and we can talk about that more, but really looking into the chemistry of how it's encoded in their skeleton and how can we actually observe how corals are responding.
Yeah, that is so cool, and I love the journey that you've had as arriving at the I would say the seeds, from what you've told us, that the seeds were already there, but they took a little more time to germinate, which is beautiful because you took your time, and it sort of hopefully has germinated into a tree which is deeply rooted as well, because you gave it that time.
Yep.
Yeah. For our viewers, if you could just explain ocean acidification in the simplest terms first, and then tell them where and how your paper comes into the picture and what you're studying with the corals. But you will have to talk to them like they're 5, because
yeah, this is like my favorite thing. I'm going to be honest, just because I also think that science communication is super important, and it's something that is so lacking in the science community. Like, oh my God, so hard. So
yeah, scientists are really bad at science communication.
Trust me, I know. I experience this all the time. So yeah, I got you on this. So tell me if you want me to break it down further, because I totally can, but more or less with ocean acidification. So the way that it works, a lot of people think that when I say the words ocean acidification, that I'm thinking about like acid rain or, something related to that. But the way that it works is basically humans are emitting an excess of carbon dioxide emissions. So the atmosphere holds those carbon dioxide emissions. And over time, the ocean actually is able to absorb those carbon dioxide emissions. So the ocean is the largest carbon sink. And more or less, actually, it's not necessarily the best thing, even though it's, great for taking carbon out of the atmosphere and storing that carbon over time. It changes the chemistry of the ocean. And the way that that works is basically as that carbon dioxide is absorbed into the surface of the ocean, that carbon dioxide actually reacts with water, and that reaction produces something called carbonic acid. And carbonic acid, more or less, is a really weak acid, and so it just dissolves or dissociates realistically really quickly in the ocean. And it produces products. So in the ocean, there's something called dissolved inorganic carbon. And what that is basically the species of carbon in the ocean. And so it's carbon dioxide, carbonic acid, something called bicarbonate, and carbonate. So as that carbonic acid dissociates, it turns into either bicarbonate or carbonate. But the pH of the ocean will depend on when that carbonic acid dissociates, if it will turn into carbonate or if it will turn into bicarbonate. And more or less, if you're adding a lot of carbon dioxide into the surface of the ocean, like trying to make this, a little more simple, but it's great if I have I have a really cool diagram of this, obviously don't have that right now. But more or less, if you're adding a lot of carbon dioxide into the ocean, it's lowering the pH. And so what's happening is the speciation between carbonate and bicarbonate is shifting and lowering the pH, and also making, this is what's important for my paper, carbonate less prevalent. So carbonate is really important because corals are formed of calcium carbonate, not calcium bicarbonate. So if we're changing this speciation based on pH from this addition of carbon dioxide to be a lower pH and to prefer bicarbonate, you're lowering this carbonate, I'm going to call it carbonate ion concentration, but more or less what that means is just lower carbonate in the ocean. And if corals are formed of calcium carbonate, if you're lowering the amount of carbonate in the ocean, obviously you're going to, quote unquote, have less calcium carbonate for corals to form their skeletons from. So overall, the addition of carbon dioxide is lowering the pH, but it's also causing for that mineral to be less prevalent just on this basic reaction based on how carbon is basically prevalent, and I want to say speciated in the ocean.
That is great. I think we sort of, again, me too, I had an idea of how the ocean acidification works, but that has been a really great explanation for me as well, because now I have a very clear picture of why this is so devastating for corals, shellfish, or any other species that requires that skeleton to be formed. And I think. Go ahead, Meghna.
Yeah, I mean that was just a really, really great explanation. I think the kind of patience and how you explained it was just beautiful to know that you didn't leave a small stone unturned. You gave the entire explanation. But where does my question, if I don't know what Oops's question would be, but my question is, so where does your research step in, and what have you found through your research with the corals and the ocean acidification?
So it's a complicated question, I will say, just because my research is just this tiny little, we'll call it a tiny little polyp, on a coral, in the grand scheme of what a coral is, because, my little analogy of corals are these organisms that are actually millions of organisms in one, let's call it, bubble. of what you think a coral is just one organism, it's millions. So like my research is like one of those tiny little polyps in like the whole grand scheme of the puzzle. But I will say that what it is, again, a very complicated question, but I love the fact that my research is kind of looking at how the signature of how that chemical change is actually recorded in the chemical signature of the coral skeleton. So I'm going to like explain this background because it'll make it, a lot more clear as to where this research fits in. So corals, when they're forming their skeletons, I wish I had my diagram here because I have it. It's just in my office and it's, it's late, so I'm not there. But I have a cool model that basically shows this. So like when you're looking at a coral from above, you're seeing that coral tissue. So all of these research studies which not all of them, of course, like I don't want to be black and white, but are looking at coral bleaching, right? So they're looking at that coral tissue that you actually see and what gives the coral the color. Mm-hmm. So you have this coral tissue, and like in that coral tissue also you have these polyps, and it's like they're in the same, not family. I'm not a biologist, so like you can really correct me here, but same like class as jellyfish, cnidarian. But more or less like there's millions of these polyps in this coral tissue that actually compose the coral. And underneath these polyps, which that living tissue, is the coral skeleton, which is what you'll find on the beach, which is the dead coral skeleton, which is the actual calcium carbonate. And as corals are growing, beneath that polyp that you actually see and the existing coral skeleton, which is what you would find on the beach, is this tiny, very isolated microfluid, which is called the coral calcifying fluid. And what's really cool about this and what ties into my research is that corals basically, it's thought that this fluid originates from ambient seawater, so seawater in general. And so corals are able to pull in the seawater through their tissues, and they're able to change and physiologically regulate the chemistry of this fluid. And in doing so, they actually can induce these conditions that are really favorable for them to form that calcium carbonate mineral, and then therefore form their calcium carbonate skeletons. So they basically are changing the chemistry to be a little bit different from the seawater. So like, as I was saying, like you're seeing this decrease in carbonate ion in seawater. In this coral calcifying fluid, they're able to regulate it so it's not as, again, like I'm going to use like very careful words because there might be studies who might prove otherwise. So in my study, I found that they are able to regulate this fluid despite ocean acidification and continue to grow their skeletons. But I found that this was at a cost. There's a parameter specifically that I study, but if you want me to get a little bit more technical, I can go down that road, but I kind of want to keep it here and we can talk about that more if you want to know more. But more or less, like I found that they were able to regulate the chemistry of this fluid and able to still regulate that growth of their skeleton despite the impacts of ocean acidification in that region, but at a cost where they're growing these, more vertical skeletons. Again, really simplifying this, but more vertical skeletons as opposed to like densely, like laterally thickening these skeletons so that they're growing. Yes, they are growing, but they're growing these structurally weak and more susceptible skeletons to other potential anthropogenic or more or less human-induced causes of climate change.
And like that is really cool to hear at at its face value as well. But we've because we've all seen the heartbreaking photos from GBR or other reefs around the world where the bleaching events have happened, and visually it looks very, as you were saying, like the bright corals being what they are, visually very appealing. it looks very sad and depressing to general eye. um it feels like a story of like loss and unrecoverable loss. Do you think this is the evidence that you have found in your research? This is this the corals adapting to that, or responding to that event, acidification event, or is this something that the ability the corals already had, and it is just now having to use it in a more profound way? um
I think that's a great question because it's something that I kind of struggle with when I'm talking about my research, because technically I did show that there is some sort of adaptation or resilience in these corals, because my corals, I had two corals that I specifically studied, long-lived corals, and they were both collected from the Coral Sea. So one from the Great Barrier Reef, and then one was collected specifically from the Coral Sea. And I did show that, yes, to ocean acidification specifically, they are, notice my quotes, able to adapt to ocean acidification. Now, the issue with me saying that is there are so many other factors that are happening at the exact same time that are not just ocean acidification. And I mean, you had even just said it about bleaching. And I know from firsthand, from diving in the Great Barrier Reef, that coral bleaching is a major issue. And that's temperature related, not chemical temperature. So it's like, okay, so we have this temperature issue. Now we also have this chemical issue from ocean acidification. Okay, but then what about all of these other issues from like an increase in nutrients, also an increase in storms because of climate change? It's like all of these different factors are all happening at the exact same time. So taking this one piece of the puzzle and looking at it and being like, okay, so here's one piece of the puzzle, and I'm disseminating it as much as I possibly can for a research study. We all know how science works, you know what I mean? Like you're taking one tiny piece and extrapolating on that. From what I saw, yes, like I can see some sort of adaptation in this specific species, but I also looked at two corals, so it's like, what about in other regions of the world? What about on shorter time scales? What about on longer time scales? It's like, yes, but it's like a hint of hope, but it's like this like glimmer of like bioluminescence that's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and but I also think that is the beauty of science, where you have done your research, and you've contributed to our understanding and taken it further, and then someone else, or multitudes of other people can come in and exactly extrapolate on the other parts of this equation, and or take your understanding further, what your paper has helped us understand. You talked about looking at these two corals, and in your research setting, and their adaptations, whatever tiny that might be. And did you find any limits to that adaptation, or do you posit there are any limits in that specific kind of adaptation that you talked about?
I would presume, yes, that there has to be some limits. Realistically speaking, corals are super sensitive organisms. I mean, when I think about temperature specifically, I mean, it's like a 0.5 degrees Celsius above and below their main threshold, and that's when they bleach. And they're kind of babies. Like they're really sensitive. So I would presume that, yeah, there has to be some sort of threshold. And I can't say necessarily exactly what that is and what that could be, more or less, because that does start to get into a biology realm. And I live in my beautiful chemistry bubble. where I love to live here and then give this chemistry piece to these people who can think like genetics and like what if I will say like this is something that I've thought about and I will not go down this road, so maybe someone else can,
Yeah.
which is what if there are some species that actually have like developed some strains of genetics, like some mutations that
Mm.
have allowed for them to develop some additional resilience and adaptation to ocean acidification specifically. Like a lot of people have been focusing on temperature because that's bleaching.
Mm-hmm.
I, of course, live in my chemistry bubble, and I think about the fact, and I do think this is important, and I will mention this because I'm always like, oh, the bleaching people, but I'm a chemist person. So, like, let me be like, okay, well, here's why the chemistry matters for like
Mm-hmm.
a second with the coral, where,
Yeah.
you know, I live in my chemistry bubble. It's important for ocean acidification. I mean, I just said, and this is proven that corals are growing structurally weaker skeletons,
Mm-hmm.
where like coral reef biodiversity is dependent on structural complexity. So these massive reef building corals that like are not just mounds, are not just branching corals, are not just plating corals. It's like all of the different species combined that allow for all of these organisms to live within the reef. But if you have these structurally weaker skeletons growing, you're going to see a lot more breakage. You're going to see a lot more erosion. You're going to see a lot more bioerosion. You're going to see a lot, so it's not just the bleaching, because obviously that's important. I mean, if the coral is dying, the coral is dying. But if you don't have the structural complexity and the actual skeleton to hold that organism, then what's the point? Like, that's my perspective. So I am curious, like what is this threshold that allows for the corals to adapt or not adapt? What species will adapt more? What will not? Like it's such an interesting, complex, again, system. Like, you know?
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned around the biology side as well, again, we are not biologists as well, but what's interesting there is, of course, there might be some mutations, there might be some adaptations, there might be some evolutions that are happening, but the changes are happening at such a rapid rate that this is not a time scale that nature in general is used to. So I think that those changes in their environment is such dire and such urgent as well.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you saying that, and I want to make one comment before you keep going, that there is a time period. Okay, so I personally am really fascinated by paleoclimate. So looking
Mm-hmm.
way back in time and examining how things have changed on other time scales to relate them to what is happening now. And that's really
Yeah,
related to my research now. So there is a time
that's cool.
scale in the
Mm-hmm.
past that you might find interesting, and listeners also might find interesting, which is
Yeah,
called
go ahead.
the Paleo-Eocene thermal maximum. It happened about 56 million years ago, and it is like the geologic analog for what's happening now. It was not, I mean, what's happening now is just absolutely on unprecedented time scales. Like, there's no event in geologic history that is comparable to the amount of change that we are inducing right now.
Mm-hmm.
However, the PETM, Paleo-Eocene thermal maximum, is it is the rapid climate analog to what is happening now, where you can see rapid ocean acidification, you can see rapid temperature increases, and it's a time scale where people have really been investigating organisms to see how they're responding to rapid climate change and kind of assess if we are going to see, obviously it's not going to be exactly the same, but can we assess, an analog for what's happening now, really fascinating. Something that maybe you might find interesting at some point, because it's the only thing, not the only, but notice my quotes again. Like, it is a fantastic event in geologic time to probe what might be happening now.
I think it is very interesting because as humans, we like knowing what's coming in front of us.
Exactly.
We love the fact that we know what's going to happen or what might happen as well. So if there is an analog and if we can draw some conclusions based on that, I think that will help us further our policy changes and guide us in the right direction in those spaces as well, where we know this is coming in the future. Meghna, you had something to ask.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question where you said that these corals are adapting and now they're growing vertically instead of branching out. So when they're growing vertically, what is like the long term effects? Like, if they don't branch out, is there like some long term side effect or a negative effect of that? Or with them adapting vertically, do they still survive similarly, but they're just changing the structure?
That's a great question. So for the species that I look at specifically, it's called Parietes. It's really the genus, because Parietes are really weird, where it's really hard to break them down to a species. So a lot of papers will just be like Parietes, SPP, because it's like, it's Parietes. But they're huge mound corals, and they are found literally all over the world. Like, I have scuba dove in many places, and I will always find Parietes corals. So they're not branching corals, they're just large mounds. So when I'm talking about this vertical growth versus lateral growth, I'm thinking in this mound as opposed to like branching corals, which could be a whole other separate topic, and we can go down that rabbit hole, but we're not gonna, because that's like, whole other can of worms here. But for Parietes specifically, so the big mound corals, so when they're growing vertically, more or less, they're not thickening the skeleton. So it's like, okay, so what it's actually called is, wow, this is how I could tell it's almost 1:00 in the morning, because I'm like, ooh, I just had like the train come and then the train go. But I know that the lateral thickening is skeletal density. Oh my God, wow, this is really how I could tell I'm so tired. I'm just going to call it vertical growth for right now. For the, oh my God, wow. I hate when that happens, because, when you're like, I need to remember that word.
Yeah, it'll come to you. It'll come to you in time. Yeah.
Hopefully. But more or less, so skeletal density is like that lateral thickening. And then you have vertical growth. So coral calcification is a combination of these two things. Linear extension. Thank you, brain. Okay, awesome. So that's vertical growth. So you have linear extension, vertical growth, skeletal density, lateral thickening. The combination of these two growth styles is called coral calcification. And I know that you'll read tons of things about coral calcification, combination of these two things. So more or less, I can't say always, and I can't say sometimes, but I will say, like, there are times where corals, when they are trying to grow their skeletons under stressful conditions, will preferentiate this vertical growth, so that linear extension, as opposed to that lateral thickening. And when they do that, more or less, yes, it is at a cost to their skeleton, because think of it as like a toothpick as opposed to like an entire like wooden plank. Like, if you had a storm come through and you have a toothpick, the toothpick is going to break. But if you have a storm come through and you have an entire wooden plank, even though it might be at the same exact scale and height as that toothpick, it's going to hold up better because it has that thickening of it. So if you think about it like that, it really does make a difference in the coral skeleton, even with these big mounding corals, because if they're not as thick, they could have like bioeroders come in within it. Like there's just, again, like I'm just like, whoo, there's a rabbit hole, and I'm gonna not go down the rabbit hole. So I'll leave it at that. That basically, like, it's a major cost to how they're growing their skeletons. And the way that I think about it is, if I'm looking at these big mounding corals and this is how they're responding, like, what about the branching corals? I mean, they're going to be even more susceptible to these elements. But I'm not a biologist and I don't study those corals, so we're just like not going to go down that rabbit hole, and we're going to stay where we are now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's similar to, you gave a great analogy. I think it's very comparable to trees that grow on land as well, taller trees versus more thicker and densely grown shorter trees, effects of storms and things like that.
Corals and trees are very similar, I will say, like dendrochronology and corals, like they grow very similarly, so, but very different. But
yeah,
we like to use trees in a similar way because they grow growth rings, and so do corals. So
given the gloom and doom situation, in the sense that we always hear a lot of negative news, especially about the ocean and the corals and everything, what are some of the things that you would want as steps, or what are some of the ideal steps that need to be taken now to kind of protect the corals and help them survive?
there are so many things that need to be done. There's so many things that need to be done. It's just, I mean, from my ocean acidification standpoint, it's just like carbon dioxide. Like, that is a major problem. Like, the carbon dioxide changing the chemistry of the ocean is a major problem. Like, there needs to be some sort of way to mitigate that. What that is, I do not know, because I don't think that geoengineering is an answer. I really don't. And it's such a complex problem because it's really it's a human problem. Like, the problem is that, like, we as a species and as a society need to take steps in the right direction to be more climate conscious. And it's not just coral reefs, and that's another whole rabbit hole. But it's difficult because I can't say, like, oh, I made a joke, I'm going to be honest, when I was in grad school, where I was like, we can just put big fans in a coral reef and we'll just cool them down. Like, totally joking. But, like, like, it's not that simple, and it makes it difficult because the policy decisions that need to be made are so complex, because every single country is different. Every single society's needs are different. Humans as a species think about this problem differently depending on where they live in the world. And so this global, it needs to be global, but how is, And I think about it because, realistically speaking, like, if I had kids, I have no idea. I don't think my kids would ever be able to scuba dive and actually see a healthy coral reef at this state. I don't think that we as a global society have the capability to actually implement measures to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions to a point where ocean acidification won't necessarily be as severe, where temperature will not be as severe, where it's what about all of the storms and all of the implications that are going to happen anyway? Even if we just stopped right now, it will still happen. Like, these implications will still happen for some time. So it's complex. It's a great question because I think about this on a very regular basis, and I'm going to be honest, it feels a little catastrophic, and it makes me feel pessimistic, but I don't want to be, So I'm a scientist because I have to figure out like why and how and like what can I do to understand and maybe inform these policy decisions. But I also live in the States and we're not going to go down that pathway because I have a lot of about the way
No, I
that we're
think
dealing with this right now. But
yeah, we took a decision early on in the podcast to not be political in any
yes,
way,
which is oh
especially with
god,
the current leadership and
yes, please.
so on. And
We're on the same page.
you spoke about policy and conservation, and you think about those topics and those areas deeply as well, which is very good to know and very encouraging to know as well. Do you think about those things when you are what I want to understand, is that a deciding factor uh, in your research and how you approach your research topics, being able to impact the conservation perspective but also climate policy, because both of us feel that is like one of the most powerful tools governments can have to slow down rapidly the
Yeah,
progress of climate change.
and we're also trying not to be pessimistic, but it's hard because when you even come up with this show, you see like 4 negative news and 1 positive news. So it's so hard, and we want those changes, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
we're on the same page here. I just want that to be known. We are so on the same page. Like, it's a lot of negative. It's a sea of negative with tiny motes of positive, generally.
Mm,
So
mm,
I will say, like, yeah, I do feel like, I mean, climate change as a whole, it really informs my research direction. I mean, I'm going to be very forthright that for me, I could absolutely, like, I have the knowledge and the tools that, God forbid, I lost my job and science went to, climate science went to all hell. Pardon my French. I can't believe I just said that, but that I could go into oil and gas, but I could absolutely never go in that direction because that's not the direction that we need to be going in as a society. I would rather teach because that's way more effective when it comes to what needs to be done. I really do think that it's future generations that are going to drive a lot of the change that we need and that we need to see. But the problem is that they need to get that education and those resources in order to do it. And so for me, like, of course, I mean, my whole research is so driven by climate change and I am so driven by policy and like what does this do for society? How does this matter? What are the
mm,
implications of this? Because it's so much bigger. Like what we can do with science is so much bigger than that fish turned blue today. And that's my opinion. Like, I feel as though it's that piece of the puzzle. And for me, it's also the piece of communicating it. I think it's really important to be able to, oh, it is such an issue in science. I could go down such a rabbit hole about this, like genuinely, because I have so many opinions about the miscommunication of science and the inaccessibility of science because
mm,
scientists don't know how to communicate their science. And the only way to inform policy and the only way to inform society to actually see large scale changes is to be able to communicate these really complex situations and really
mm.
complex ideals into a format that someone who has no background into that can take it and actually understand it. Otherwise, what are we doing? That's my perspective.
Yeah,
So,
and I
yeah.
think also convey like the urgency where it needs to be conveyed. I think that's
mhm,
again the literature and the language that is used in literature, which might have its own reason why those kinds of language is used, but that often fails to convey
mhm,
the emotional baggage that comes
exactly,
with
exactly.
that piece of research,
Yep.
which is what will motivate the general lay public, I guess, to simplify it down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think Oops and me, we both agree on this that, whatever you've said, it's great hearing this from a scientist, because we struggle with so many scientists wanting to communicate their work, because we're trying to be that bridge between the work and the public, but most people want to do the work and they want to have it out in the scientific community, but they don't want to have it output to the public, the ones who can actually help facilitate the change or out in the policy making. So that's where I feel like science becomes a little boxed, and now it can't be boxed, because this is the time where we really need to start talking and taking that action.
exactly. 100%. Which I've talked about this so many times with a lot of scientists. Like, I will say, yesterday I met with one of my favorite professors and my favorite colleagues in my department. And
Mm,
she specializes in science communication, and she specializes in teaching how to efficiently communicate
mm,
science. And we were just talking about this yesterday because in my department we have a seminar where basically people will come in and they'll give an hour-long talk about their research to the entire department. And I sit in on some of those talks and I'm like, wow, I have a lot of experience and I have no idea what you are talking about. Like, the way that science is communicated is very
mm,
intrinsic to having internal knowledge about the
mm,
topic. And
yeah.
I think it really propagates a lot of fear around science because people aren't able to actually decompartmentalize it into both action and even just what are you talking about? Like,
Mm,
why is this important? What does this do? Why are you explaining this in a way if it's so important that I can't understand it? And now I'm inherently afraid of it because it doesn't make any
mm,
sense to me and nothing is explaining it to me. Like,
mm,
it's just
yeah.
the topic that I talk about with, again, that colleague very often is this miscommunication in science, and it's not cultivated at all
Mm,
in science.
yeah.
Not cultivated at all. It's almost like a learned behavior that you have to have. It's like a skill you have to have in science. Otherwise, you never learn it and it doesn't get any easier. You're just publishing in very robotic technical jargon that other people have no idea what you're talking about. And I know, trust me, I know. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why we love science communication as well,
Yeah.
because to be able to translate that, technical stuff into, a podcast, in this case, a film or a book or an article, on an illustration of some kind, it just means that you're entering the public discourse, away from that scientific monologue. Often, what you said, it feels like. But it's
And
also very great to hear that your climate policy and thinking about those things is a deciding factor for your research, and when you take your research approach. That's very great to hear as well. Sorry, Meghna.
yeah, I mean, one, I just had to say that it's great because I wish that there were more scientists like you who were open in talking about the research, who were open in simplifying the research for the public, and who were so passionate about what they were doing and passionate about talking about it. But since you're so passionate about this, what are your future projects, or what are you thinking of doing, or what are you working on currently? Is it still ocean and corals, or is it something else?
Thank you for asking. Because this is my okay, so I'm a millennial, but this is apparently, I think, a Gen Z term that's like, this is my Roman Empire. I don't know if it's a real thing, but I'm gonna say it. Um, yeah, so I will say, yes, I am very still corals. I am coral girl. I am like a
Mm,
joke. I will call myself forever the coral queen because like this is just who I am. But also ocean acidification, like it's just coral and ocean acidification is just will always be my career. It is just will
mm,
forever. But what I'm saying is the technique that I used in my paper. So I used this technique called Raman spectroscopy. So I'm so happy to go into this because I will be honest with you, like ramen is me. Like I am the ramen girl. Like this is just
mhm,
who I am. It is super, super fascinating. And a lot of people don't know about it. Even very technical scientists just like don't know about
Mm,
the benefits of this specific type of spectroscopy technique. But
mhm.
before I can go down this like crazy hole about ramen, because I swear I could talk about this for like an entire like day because I love ramen so much. And it's not ramen noodles. Like, no, let's make that so clear. But um, yeah, so basically, like to again, like not go down the hole. Ramen is what I used in my paper, and so my master's advisor is the person who created this or founded, I should say, this relationship that relates a specific peak in my spectra. So more or less, like if you look at, you know,
Mhm,
if you think of a
mhm,
spectra, but there's a
mhm,
specific peak, and that peak
mm,
width, so like the width of that peak is actually related to, it's called the saturation state of aragonite. I'm not
mhm.
even going to go down that hole. More or less, it is literally like how I talked about carbonates concentration going down in the ocean.
Yeah.
Aragonite is calcium carbonate. It's just like a specific crystal form of calcium carbonate, but more or less, aragonite is calcium carbonate.
Mm,
So saturation state is basically just like a formula that governs whether a mineral or a substance will form or if it will dissolve in a solution. So if you increase that above one, it would be like the saturate, like the solution is super saturated. So I always use like if you're making rock candy, like you add a lot of sugar to water, and the reason why you can actually form rock candy is because the water is super saturated with sugar.
mm,
You have a
mm.
saturation state above one,
Yeah.
so the sugar actually forms on that stick. So that's literally like calcium, like aragonite, which is what
Mm,
corals are formed of, but we'll say calcium carbonate. Where like you will form calcium carbonate if that, you know, number, that saturation state is above one. And same thing goes for rock candy, where like if I don't add a lot of sugar to that solution, I'm not going to form rock candy. And that's because the
mm,
water is not saturated enough to actually form that mineral. So same goes for aragonite, calcium carbonate. So more or less, like I studied that specific parameter, and that's based on again that carbonate ion concentration. Super important, and I feel like no one knows about it, and I talk about aragonite saturation state all the time, so I'm like I just need to like have that out there, that that's literally what it is. Like let's think about rock
mm,
candy.
mhm,
But more or less, like a peak in my spectra is literally related to that parameter. So like I can look at a Raman spectra that I collected from coral, and that specific peak will tell me about the saturation state of the coral fluid from exactly when it formed back in time. So this is related to what I'm doing now. My advisor for my master's founded this. My paper is actually the first ever long-term application of using this method to find that parameter. It's the only direct proxy, like the direct relationship to that
mm,
parameter that exists, and
mm,
also the only other methods that exist for looking at that specific parameter have a lot of complications and a lot of assumptions, and it's not actually looking at that parameter. So my current research is actually, because I'm the first person to ever take that and really use it, I
mm,
want to know if I could like what, oh, this is so complicated, and I get really excited about it because it's so cool, but I'm also a nerd about it, obviously, so I think this is really cool. But like, what could change that parameter? Is it just based
mm,
on what I found in my paper, or like are corals incorporating disorder in their skeleton that I'm able to pick up on in my spectra? This is so complicated that I'm like
mm,
making so short. But like what are the constraints on this? Like how
mm,
could this parameter be examined in the skeleton over time, like overlooking an entire coral skeleton, like how are corals changing over time in their growth, on a like super small scale, looking at that specific parameter that's examining
Right.
this disorder in their skeleton. It's super, super unique. It's super new and novel. And I am like again, ramen girl, and I am like the girl to study this right now. So I'm really excited on where this could go because I can actually really understand how coral growth and coral skeleton chemistry is changing over time and how I can actually extract that information. And it's not just ocean acidification based. It could also be based on all of these other factors that are chemically found in the water. So, like, how can I figure it out? And can I make this ramen proxy actually be usable for all of these other researchers to use on not just coral, but other calcium carbonate organisms like like phytoplankton, foraminifera, or just other organisms that are super important in understanding climate change because it's only been used on coral. It's before me only been used on really short time scales, and also it is super novel and new. So what can we do with it? That's I know that was a really long explanation, but it's so cool and it's so unique and novel, and it's like my little Roman Empire again. Like I am the ramen girl, so
Yeah, that is very cool, and I think um, in the the spirit of science is that as well. You figure out something, and then you go and see what else can we figure out, and what are the variables in that equation that needs to further that research. So your plan is to take further your current research and have a more holistic understanding of the situation and understand it in more depth, which I find is super cool because obviously, again, not comparing or judging or anything like that, but there are scientists who will leave a paper at a paper and then go in a different direction, which is super cool as well. But this is such an issue, and knowing you from what we have chatted thus far, your motivations behind that is very related to climate policy, climate change, conservation, and which makes it extra cool for us who are in that space, I think. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think we will not take any more of your time and let you get to bed. I know it's super late where you are. But yeah, thank you again so much for taking the time to join us on the show and sharing your research. It was super cool hearing about all your thoughts and motivation and what gets you ticking every day. It was such a pleasure having you on the show, and yeah, take care.
Yeah. And I mean, it was so much fun talking to you because you were just really in it and you had explained it so beautifully. Like it was just really great having you over and chatting with you. I mean, you were just a whole ball of energy. So that was amazing having you over. And we hope that, you stay the ramen girl and do more research in ramen, and hope this ramen becomes as popular as the noodles. So when you say I'm a ramen girl, people think about the other ramen as well eventually.
love
So
that.
yeah, so all the love and luck from us, and we just absolutely loved having you over.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I honestly, like, I know you're like, oh no, I'm not going to take up your time. I'm going to be honest, like, I loved this so much. So I really appreciated chatting with you guys. And anytime you want to talk about more science, I am always keen. So I really appreciated it. And thank you guys for inviting me. I mean, I'm glad that you read my paper and found it fascinating enough to ask.
Yeah, no, it was super fascinating, and we had to, because we have been talking about corals a lot in the show as well. Both of us are divers as well, so yeah, we obviously see corals all the time. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for staying awake late, and yeah, take care.
Yeah, thank you guys
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Um, that was so cool. That was very cool to hear. And I think, yeah, scientists, the science community, as she said as well, needs to be so much more open to these possibilities of communicating their science in an effective way. I think that energy was very evident in Jess, but yeah, I think as you said, sometimes missing from, again, not faulting anybody. Not this hasn't got this doesn't have to be a requirement for a scientist, because there can be shy scientists as well. But I think the science community should have this beacon, assign someone that responsibility, assign someone that task of you know packaging that science in a good way. And I think that's where we come in a lot as well. But it is so good to have a very enthusiastic and very communicative scientists, I
Um,
will say.
Definitely. I mean, it really broadens our horizons because whatever we understand of certain topics, when the scientists come over on our show, we understand those topics with more like depth. I think like we
Mm,
just scratch the surface when we read about it, but then because they're concentrating on one topic, that topic and the depth and the insights that they provide are quite mind blowing. Um,
mm,
and I mean, I hope it's been as mind blowing for you guys as well, because the entire ocean acidification and the little glimmer of hope and what it means for the future, um, those were things because we obviously knew what the future means if things are not taken into account right now and bigger actions are not taken into place. But the entire explanation was done so beautifully, and I hope you guys enjoyed her interview just as much as we did.
yeah. It was great having her. And again, like, shows the enthusiasm when you stay awake past midnight, um, you know, just to have a chat about your science and just to have those conversations. That is such great. Cool. We obviously did not cover too many topics, but I think the topics we chose were the important ones we wanted to cover in today's episode. But I think we'll draw a close there, Meghna. What do you say?
Yeah. Yes, I think we're way beyond our usual time. And I mean, it is a long form podcast, and we would love for you to listen to us for 4 hours as well. But
Hmm.
this is where we
And we'd
do
love to
draw.
talk for 4 hours.
Oh, that is true. That is true. But I think like for today, the messaging is just that, like really listen to Jessica's interview, and tell us what you felt about it. I mean, I was really, really mind blown, and I loved her infectious energy.
Mm,
And uh, yeah, we have a lot of other topics that we can do changes about. But today, you listen to Jessica.
that's true. That's true. And yeah, that's it for today. I think, as always, definitely do consider subscribing and following. We'll try to release a few shorts on Jessica's interview and corals in general over the next couple of weeks as well. Subscribing and following obviously helps get this message out to more and more people, because, as Jessica also mentioned, and as we keep saying, this discourse is not as you know as connected on and as apparent in the public discourse as it should be. And again, share this with your friends and family. Leave a comment that obviously helps with the reach. And share your thoughts in general. If you're listening to a recorded version of this podcast on your favorite podcasting platform, do give this show a rating. I know it's repeated to keep asking every time, but really helps disseminating this message to more and more people. But other than that, that's it for today. We'll see you next Sunday, same time, same channel. Have a good one, guys.
Bye bye.